My name is Javier Weatherspoon, and today I will be refuting the claims previously made by Rachel Winfrey that secondhand smoke caused immediate harm to non-smokers who breathe it, and she supports that by claiming that one, tobacco smoke hurts everyone who breathes it, second, that secondhand smoke can harm pregnant women and children, and third, that secondhand smoke can cause cancer. Today I will be arguing those claims. I claim that secondhand smoke does not cause immediate harm to non-smokers, and I support this with one, that secondhand tobacco smoke has no acceptable direct correlation to diseases, two, that pregnant women and children are not more susceptible to effects of secondhand smoke, and third, that secondhand smoke does not directly cause cancer. Now, for my first support, a study by the U.S. National Library of Medicine states that passive secondhand smoke may increase cardiovascular events, but only by insufficiently understood mechanisms. So, after short-term secondhand smoke exposure, we did not observe an increase in platelet aggregation, which is blood clotting, with any instruments used to conduct testing. We conclude that acute exposure to secondhand smoke is unlikely to increase platelet aggregation, and other mechanisms must be involved in the increased risk of cardiovascular events. There was also a claim that she made saying that spending time in a smoky room can increase your risk of a heart attack. Well, spending time in a smoky room does not have a significant correlation to causing heart attacks or cancer. In an article in the Journal of National Cancer Institute, they have a study of 76,000 people over more than a decade. That study found no statistically significant evidence between a correlation between lung cancer and exposure to secondhand smoke. Only after 30 years or more of living with a smoker did they find any evidence that could be admissible to develop a correlation. They also go on to state that the strongest reason to avoid passive secondhand smoke is just to change social behavior. Some people just don't like it. That same study also concludes that the body begins to repair any damage caused within 30 minutes of quitting, regardless of how long somebody has been a smoker. So in that, they're only talking about people who directly smoke. The effects of secondhand smoke are repaired exponentially faster. My secondary claim is that pregnant women and children are not more susceptible to the effects of secondhand smoke. The real issue is habitual smoking by either party. Young children somehow pick up a habit of smoking, or parents that smoke during pregnancy. And in that, the real issue is actually nicotine. Professor Theodore A. Slotkin of Duke Medical University attributes the damage to children and unborn fetuses to nicotine. And what that does is it disrupts normal development and brain activity by activating brain receptors that are not actually ready to be activated yet. And so that kind of effect is like trying to play catch with somebody that doesn't know that you're about to play catch. You can throw them the ball, you can send them a message, but they're not ready to receive it. An article by Policy Genius, well, that last point, why is it significant? An article by Policy Genius, a website that's used to navigate insurance companies, shares that life insurance companies, the people that are most concerned whether or not you smoke, cannot detect nicotine from secondhand smoke. So even if you're inhaling it, they can't detect it. There's not enough to be detectable. Now, secondhand smoke, a big concern is carbon monoxide, because that's something that is detectable in testing. Now, burning one cigarette produces 0.1 grams of carbon monoxide, but the U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates that a small engine in a motorcycle, really the smallest engines that we have, in 1 mile produces 20 grams. So let's say you were going to the doctor's office and you were going to have a test for carbon monoxide because you feel like you've been exposed to too much secondhand smoke. If you parked your car and walked to the front door from the parking lot, if a motorcycle went by, you would be exposed to the equivalent of 10 cigarettes in that short walk. So, all of the evidence that they have of detecting carbon monoxide doesn't work because anyone could have had tainted evidence on the way walking into the office. My third secondary claim is that secondhand smoke does not directly cause cancer. SurgeonGeneral.gov posted findings that no significant increase or risk of cancer was associated with one spouse's smoking by any amount or duration for anyone that lived with a smoker. Columbia University states that an increased cancer risk is usually caused by an increase of estrogen, and secondhand smoke actually decreases the amount of estrogen that a woman produces. And then in a publication by Oxford University Press, they find that a major issue with the research in diseases that people develop, when the interviewer is asking questions trying to develop this research, many people develop a recall bias towards smoking. And what that means is that a patient will recall a memory clearly, whether it is true or not. So let's say that one day you were walking down the street and you remember that one time or that one event where you stayed in a room where there was too much smoke. You'll remember that memory whether it happened or not, just based on the question. We like to attribute things to make them not our own fault. So in conclusion, secondhand smoke does not cause immediate harm to non-smokers. One, it cannot be proven to have significant correlation to diseases. Two, it does not have an increased effect on pregnancy or children. And three, it does not directly cause cancer. Thank you.
All right, it gets a little complicated at the beginning with the structure because you preview the advocate's arguments, then you basically preview what your responses to each of those arguments are going to be. I think you could give those counterclaims when you are responding to the individual arguments. It makes it sound like we've got 6 points that we're previewing here at the beginning. And like, well, wait, why are we having that? We don't need that until you are making the counterclaim on the individual point. So that's just a little technical thing that I think would help clarify stuff. I thought that you did a very good job citing evidence in your argument on the individual points. I do think you need to have a little bit more contrast to the information that the advocate presented. So you've got good evidence. You explain what your evidence means and how it addresses those particular arguments. How does that relate to what the information was that the advocate presented? Why is your information better? You know, why is the conclusion that we're drawing from your point seem more reasonable given the evidence that they presented versus the evidence that you have? But you know, that aside, like I said, I thought that you did a good job providing information to support the position that you're taking on those counterclaims. So there needs to be maybe a little bit more analysis of the advocate's evidence and reasoning on their points, as well as building the argument that you have for your position. You've got good counterclaims on the individual points. You address those issues pretty effectively. I think that on the second point, for instance, the notion that nicotine is not measurable outside of the person consuming the cigarettes is an interesting point, because that's one that, you know, that's what all secondhand smoke is going to be. I think the point that you're making here is, if it's not measurable, we have no way of researching whether or not secondhand smoke has these negative effects from the nicotine that people are exposed to. Well, what evidence did the advocate cite that talked about that? Did they ignore the nicotine connection entirely? Did they have information that talked about this nicotine risk, and that, you know, that produces that? And then you can maybe apply that particular piece of information to those studies. I think that would make that a little bit stronger. But I thought that was a good argument. And I like the communication issue that you do on a regular basis on these points, when you kind of give us a little bit of an analogy or an explanation or a visualization, like the one that you had about the motorcycle, suggesting that you could be exposed to carbon monoxide, more carbon monoxide walking from your car into the medical center that you were going to be tested on, and then you would get from, you know, the secondhand smoke that you're going to get, and the notion that there's going to be some harm that comes from that is a little problematic. I thought that I like the way that you kind of explained those things. I think you're doing a good job there. There's a very good summary at the end of the speech as well. So it's easy to follow, it's well explained. I think you've got good evidence. I do think you need to spend a little bit more time talking about the advocate's evidence and reasoning. All right, thank you.